Hi guys, this is your girl Wakeji Kamore and welcome to Reflections by Wakeji Kamore. Happy new month. We are in the 6th month of the year. Me by the way, I am still in shock. Like, how are we in June? Didn't we just start this year just the other day, you guys? Oh my God. Days are going so fast. We're becoming older faster. I hope you guys are doing well. I pray that this month brings with it joy, it brings with it peace and love, it brings with it all the things that you're praying for that are according to God's will. Because I'm not about to wish that everything that you want comes to pass, because only those things that are aligned to God's will come to pass. All right, so we are still looking at the book of Psalms. Today we are going to be looking at Psalms chapter 68, which I will not be reading word for word because it's pretty of a long chapter. So I'm not going to be reading that word for word, but I would request that you pause this recording and you read the chapter for yourself so that you understand what David intended to write about when he was writing this psalm, and what it is that he wanted to write about, what it is that he wanted to convey. And then when you have paused and you have read the chapter for yourself, you've understood the chapter, you've understood what's happening. Most likely the Lord has spoken to you through it. The Holy Spirit has enlightened you. You can come and you can listen to me as I give you a summary of it and as I tell you like the lessons that I have picked up from this chapter. So Psalms chapter 68 is a Psalms of David in which he praises God for his power and for his care for the helpless. And the helpless here included the orphans and the widows. David recalls the care for the Israelites, or rather God's care for the Israelites when they were traveling through the wilderness, and the great display of God's power that was seen at Mount Sinai. He speaks of a procession of worship made up of the tribes of Israel and foreign dignitaries who honored the Lord. Some of those attributes that we see in this chapter include God's power and victory. And this is seen in verse 1 and 2. It says, God shall arise, his enemies shall be scattered, and those who hate him shall flee before him. As smoke is driven away, so you shall drive them away. As wax melts before the fire, so the wicked shall perish before God. So Psalm 68 portrays God as a mighty warrior who conquers his enemies and delivers his people. The psalm celebrates God's strength and ultimate triumph over evil. Another attribute of God that we see in this chapter is God's compassion and care. And we see this in verse 5 to 6. And it says, he's the father of the fatherless, the protector of widows, is God in his holy habitation. God settles the solitary in a home, and he leads out the prisoners to prosperity. So we see here he's taking care of the people that are fatherless, the people that have lost their husbands, and people that are prisoners. So this psalm highlights God's care for orphans, for widows, for the lonely, as well as provision for those that are oppressed and those that are prisoners. This emphasizes that God's role as a protector and a provider for the vulnerable people. The other attribute we see is God's presence and guidance. And this we see in verse 7 and says, "O God, when you went out before your people, when you marched through the wilderness." So the psalmist David is reminding us that God's presence makes a difference in our lives. That even in difficult times, it encourages believers to face challenges with the courage and confidence of knowing that God is with them, that God is marching through the wilderness with them, that God is going before them, and God that is going before us, that the Lord's presence and guidance makes a difference in our lives. The other thing we see in this chapter is call to worship and to praise. And this is seen in verse 32. It says, "O kingdoms of the earth, sing to God, sing praises to the Lord. Ascribe power," this is verse 34, "ascribe power to God, whose majesty is over Israel and whose power is in the skies." So Psalm 68 concludes with a call of praise and worship of God and his mighty deeds and all his ongoing provision and it invites believers to join in a collective celebration of God's power and goodness. Another attribute we see of God here is God's justice. The psalm speaks of God's justice, highlighting his role in bringing the wicked to account for their actions and desire to see his people prosper. As in, there's so many attributes that we see of God in this chapter. I pray that you get the time to actually just go back and read that chapter again, so that you can see God in his attribute, and you might even see an attribute of God that you actually need in this season of your life. Do you need God to show his justice? Do you need God to show his power and victory over your life? Do you need God's compassion and care? Do you need God's presence and guidance? And do you need to actually be in a space of praising God and worshiping God? I pray that this psalm speaks to you, and I pray that you see the character of God or the attribute of God that you desperately need right now, and that you can see the reasons as to why you should remain in praise and worship in this season of your life. Thank you so much for listening, and see you tomorrow.